Good morning, and thank you for joining today's webinar and panel discussion on the Maritime and Defense Supply Chain Program. My name is Don Lynch, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel discussion and sharing some additional details on this program. The Maritime and Defense Supply Chain Capacity Program is designed to enable New York State's manufacturers to better compete in the maritime and defense industries through funding programs that will prepare them to comply with applicable certifications, increase awareness of new manufacturing technologies, and broaden their knowledge of new component suppliers. Funded programs specifically include training and support to enhance quality management and achieve compliance with ISO 9001:2015 or AS 9100, training and support to enhance cybersecurity to achieve compliance with CMMC Level 1 or Level 2, training and support to establish practices required to achieve compliance with ITAR, consulting support to evaluate new manufacturing technologies, and consulting support to identify new component suppliers. I'll provide more details on the funded program shortly. Here is the agenda we're going to cover today. We'll start with a little bit of information on the program. I'll have a panel discussion, and we'll talk about program eligibility, and we'll have time for Q&A. If you have questions about the program or for our panelists, please submit them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Let's meet the panel of experts from some of New York State's largest and most successful defense manufacturers. We have Chris Sheldon with us, a purchasing manager from Amphenol, Steve Raymond, senior supply chain manager from TTM Technologies, and Joe McDermond, director of quality for Syracuse Research Corporation. Let me now stop sharing, and I'll ask our friends from these three companies to introduce themselves. So let's start with Chris. Chris, can you please introduce yourself to our audience and share some information on what Amphenol Aerospace produces in New York State and what your role is there?
Sure. So welcome, everyone, and good morning. My name is Chris Sheldon. I am the purchasing manager for Amphenol Aerospace. We are located in Sydney, New York. We just celebrated our 100-year anniversary at this location. We have two other locations, Mesa, Arizona, and Nogales, Mexico, for which we support from our various purchasing departments that all roll up to our location. The Amphenol Corporation is an extremely large business. It's $15 billion in sales in 2024 with 100,000 employees worldwide. The Sydney location, our division rolls up into what is called the North American Military Group that is part of that corporation. So you all may be familiar with an Amphenol business. It may be part of our division, it may not, but the Sydney location that I represent does have a support into the military group, and our three locations are all my responsibilities. Our markets, of course, are military, but we also have a strong commercial support in the Boeing aircraft and industry, commercial industry. And the products we sell are variety, but they're all interconnect products, circulars and board level connectors that are in aircraft and ground vehicles for the military. My organization for purchasing, we have a strong department in the Sydney location, but we also have, because of our various supply chain throughout the globe, we have buyers in Shenzhen, China, Nogales, Mexico, and Pune, India. However, the New York activity, the supply base here in this state would be supported through the Sydney office. And so why don't I talk briefly about our commodities? In New York State, we would be looking for suppliers such as machined metal. So that it's probably one of our leading categories of spend, uh, definitely needing to grow that base in New York State. We have a lot of raw material that we also buy that would be New York State metal that serves our factory here and in other, we also ship from New York State into Mesa and Nogales due to the nature of the materials that we're buying. We have limited sources for that. And then finally, I'll just briefly cover that much of what we do in the military side is what was mentioned earlier. We would have ITAR documentation, information that needs to be supported through ITAR rated suppliers. CMMC, very important area for us, and we also have QPL products. So much of our sourcing is going to be controlled through DLA, which is a organization in the government that covers mil-spec products, which our products fall into. So that's something about my background.
Great, great. Thank you very much, Chris. Fascinating information. I appreciate you sharing that. Next, please meet Steve Raymond, Senior Manager of Supply Chain at TTM Technologies in Syracuse. Steve, could you also please introduce yourself, share some information on what TTM Technologies produces in New York State and your role with your organization?
Sure, and thanks, Don. Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. So, as Don said, my name is Steve Raymond, and the Senior Manager here at TTM Technologies in Syracuse, New York, Senior Supply Chain Manager. So, TTM is also a relatively large organization on the order of $3 billion global footprint, operations across many countries. And we're broken up primarily into two sectors of the organization. Directionally, 50% or so is focused on manufacturing of bare board printed wire boards, PWBs or PCBs, whatever you want to call them. I'm part of a business unit that's focused on aerospace and defense, what we call our integrated electronics group, which is essentially assemblies. So we've got a number of plants in the U.S. in this integrated electronics group focused on assemblies, which are higher up on the food chain from a component level. So we're building small microelectronic assemblies as well as larger RF systems. So, and we supply to the major primes here in the States and overseas as well. So, my focus is again on the supply chain. I've got a team of buyers and supplier quality engineers, and we're responsible for primarily the operations here in Syracuse, with some reach across to some of our other sites. So as TTM grows and expands, our view is trying to look across the larger footprint. So, we act as one organization throughout this integrated electronics group. As far as the categories that we buy and manage here locally, we do board level assemblies. So fortunately, we have our internal sister plants who support the bare board side, which vertically integrated would make sense. But we do buy quite a bit in terms of electronic components. Some of those are custom and really sophisticated. We got some ASICs and ICs from the higher end electronic components down to chip resistors. We also buy quite a few board level connectors, and then say machine metal assemblies, and were all components that would support the need for the chassis and cases. So on the microelectronic side, there were also related electronic components that fall into a specialized hermetic package and related components. So that's the high level. My background, real quick though. So mechanical engineer by trade, and spent quite a bit of my career in the automotive industry. So having a few years working with the aerospace and defense, it's there's an interesting aspect, and curious to hear how my panel mates discuss the quality side, relative, our needs, and how the culture is in terms of our standards and our processes compared to, say, the automotive side is really fairly different. So thanks for having me, and I think that's it for now, Don.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, and some similarities already as we continue our conversation, and a nice transition with that quality lead over to Joe McDermond, Director of Quality at Syracuse Research Corporation. So, Joe, would you please introduce yourself, share a little bit more about what SRC produces locally, and your role with the company?
Sure. Good day, everybody. Excited to be here. Love panel discussions, been part of these types of forums before. Not only about talking about some things, but also learning and listening and learning myself about what's going on out there in industry as well. We have partnered with TDO in the past on some things. Excellent to work with, so just a plug there.
Thank you.
I have been with SRC for the last 7 years, and Director of Quality. I have responsibility for the QMS system overall, but also supplier quality. Why I'm also excited to be part of this, my background is I came up in automotive. I worked for Honda. I spent 10 years at Harley Davidson. Part of this is also maritime. I worked in the marine industry with the Brunswick Corp. Some of the boat brands such as Sea Ray at that time, Boston Whaler, Hatteras Shots, and then also worked in the med device arena in orthopedics with what is now Zimmer Biomet. Did a little bit of consulting myself, but I also spent a lot of time attached to purchasing my career, whether it was supplier development, supplier quality, or also doing the purchasing and sourcing duties in some of those companies. SRC itself is a New York company that was born out of an attachment and research and development arm of Syracuse University, and it was broken out, I forget the exact date, at least 40, 50 years ago, where it is independent, it is a nonprofit, and the research and development side for electronics, radars, sensors, and technical services and analysis is really what we get into. The headquarters is out of Syracuse, New York, and we do have other facilities, Dayton, Ohio, San Antonio, Texas, Charlottesville. And to help support our foreign military sales, we also have some overseas support in Australia, the UK, and also Canada. So with that, I'm excited to be here, and we'll go from there.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Joe. All right, I'd like to invite our experts to answer a few questions about their supplier needs and characteristics of an ideal supplier in the defense industry. So let's start with Chris. Chris, what are some of the characteristics of a successful supplier at Amphenol Aerospace?
The prototype, or I should say, the plan that I would expect from a supplier that is successful with us and proven over time is interest in our business, sort of an alignment with their strategy and business objectives with what our needs are. It's a company or a supplier that would have the interest in investing in their business, whether that's people, whether in developing skills that match what our requirements are, or capital investments that are required to support volume growth as our business scales up on a certain product line or a category of spend. Having the capabilities that would mean in, let's say, metal machining, an understanding of the types of metal machined parts that we have and the equipment that could support that. So there's a lot of multi-axis mill turn machines that we go after, or suppliers we go after, who have those on their floors. And a company that has long-term vision, and that is not to try to see it as a one and off order, but something that we could build a long-term relationship on and grow together into the future.
Great, great. Thank you, Chris. That's a great set of characteristics. Steve, Joe, anything to add to Chris's comments about characteristics of successful suppliers that you may seek across your supply base at TTM Technologies or SRC?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So from my perspective, and this isn't unique to TTM, the characteristics of a successful supplier, there has to be generally a good fit in terms of the scale, the size. So, based on our volume and our spend, our organization has to have an appetite and want that business, right? So there's cases, of course, where our volume of business is relatively small compared to the size of our supplier, and that doesn't always work in our favor. And likewise, probably for the supplier, we might be more work than we're worth. And so, and truthfully, in the aerospace and defense industry, we're basically a finicky customer, right? We've got some challenges, and our needs can be high. So there has to be that right fit and the interest, right? There has to be an appetite from the supplier to want to work with us. From my side, though, what I see is really a strong willingness to work. And obviously we have challenges. It's manufacturing. That's the nature of the beast. So there has to be that appetite, and that is part of that characteristic. But on top of all that, just raw capability from the supplier, right? And furthermore, and not to steal Joe's thunder, but proven process controls, right? And that's one thing that, from a culture standpoint, my partners here and I at TTM are trying to drive that throughout our supply base, is get them to the next level, right? And so, and that's my tie back into the auto side, because really that is the next level in my mind. So
Yeah.
those are some of the characteristics from my perspective, Don.
Great, great. Thank you, Steve. Joe, anything to add?
Yeah, I would tag off of what Steve and Chris said. I'm going to wave the quality compliance flag, whether it's ISO or AS. But not only our customers are demanding performance out of us, but we're obliged to have that performance from a quality and delivery perspective. And that's how we do the scorecard. It's really, hey, how are we looking at risk with our suppliers? Because the last thing you want to be asked is, hey, why are you living with these problems? So that performance aspect is absolutely critical, at least from that frame. Sometimes you'll get into the service standpoint, so you got to be responsive. Not that I'm a fan of this, but I've had some organizations say, hey, we got to add a service element in there. And then you start getting into the more subjective, well, I've called this person 3 times and they haven't responded, so I'm going to ding them X points. I'd rather keep it just the raw data. So you must perform to both the quality and delivery aspects, at least in my mind.
Excellent. Yeah, great feedback and great responses from everybody. Joe, I'd like to ask you a question along a similar lines, and that is, what separates a good supplier? So if you will, the majority of your suppliers that are meeting your requirements, from a great supplier, the few, the elite, that kind of earn that top ranking at SRC.
Yeah, I would point towards our customers that are very demanding. In some cases, they're even ambiguous. Like, here's a problem, but we don't know how to solve it. Now we got to go into the mode of, at least from the R&D aspect, how are we going to solve this? And that reaches back into the suppliers of Well, who are those that are agile enough and help us figure out these problems when we don't even know what we're doing yet? And that speaks to, design for excellence, participant, we'll call it DFX because that X can be designed for manufacturing, designed for cost, designed for test, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's a top tier type of supplier. And I've been in industries where you can't treat, and I think either, Chris or Steve mentioned this before, you can't have that same expectation of every supplier. There are those that are your top tier critical suppliers that have that capability, that is their niche. They're able to do that. Whereas the next tier down is really a key supplier where, I mean, let's face it, we're highly dependent on our supply base. I mean, your material costs, coming in the door can be anywhere from 50 to 75%. So they're sort of the next level down, but not as close a partner, with you. And then there's others that, maybe not as critical, non-critical, I would call it, where it's more of a commodity buy. You can kind of get it anywhere. And then you also have tiers where there are houses or suppliers that really have no right being a production supplier, but they're excellent at being, an R&D house or a quick turn supplier. So, those different tiers have different expectations. So when you ask me what's the best, it's really that top tier stakeholder that's more integrated with our business, where we can allow it per the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, because it's easier in some of the other commercial industries that don't have those requirements, where you can actually partner up with them a lot better. So to me, if you understand those suppliers and what their offering are, and in turn, those suppliers have to be truthful with themselves. What niche do they want to play in? Do they want that type of capability? Because those different tiers I described, there's room for everybody. But as far as those that I want closest and integrated and know me best, they're the ones that when I come and say, hey, here's a problem we're trying to solve. Any thoughts there? They're the ones that are going to help us respond quickly and perform from a quality and delivery aspect.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that insight. Very, very helpful. Chris, Steve, anything to add to this line of thought about your top tier, your truly excellent suppliers? What are they like? What do they do for you?
So, yeah, I can make a few comments. I would just add that, we're looking at a supplier that is meeting really the quality standards that we have, and is supportive of lead time and, being competitively priced. That sounds simple, but there is a need for our industry and probably most industries to be nimble and quick and fast. And we cannot wait any longer for long lead times on delivery. That's sort of a expectation that probably is most industries these days, because of customers just don't want to wait any longer. They need it now. So you got to act fast, but you've got to be compliant. So that's a nimble supplier.
Great. Thank you. Steve, anything to add?
Yeah, real quick, and I agree with both what Chris and Joe have said. So from my side, I'd say my typical mantra is price, delivery, quality, and service, and really a supplier who can perform well in all of those pillars, to me, is a standout supplier. So I can give you an example. Last year, we have a supplier day where for the integrated electronics group, several plants within TTM, we join forces and come together with our top suppliers. So I nominated one organization last year who really performed extraordinarily well, not only meeting deliveries at a competitive price, and of course there were some challenges, right? And so to that point, and that's why I tie into that service aspect, which, and I get it, Joe, it's hard to measure service, but as part of I'd say subjective aspect,
Yeah.
This organization went above and beyond in terms of our partnership, right? That term is thrown out somewhat cliche these days, but I would say, willing to engage, open the doors, work closely with us to try to evaluate, sample, work through some challenges from say design aspect and manufacturability issues. And again, this manufacturing, these things do come up. So, the responsiveness, the willing to engage and support, this organization really stepped up. And so to me, that is why they stood out from some of the others. I can give you an example, not to point to a negative, but one organization we work with is a sizable, supplier to us. Their first response is typically, "Hey, it wasn't me. It wasn't my fault." So, really, again, the idea of willing to and interested in engaging to solve issues and challenges is what helps them stand out.
Great, great. Thank you, Steve. And Steve, I'd like to direct this next question your way to start us off. What capabilities would you like to see your suppliers develop in the future?
Again, I'll go back to process control and overall, I would say, general term quality, but consistency. We have some challenges, I would say, on our side where we've got a range of not necessarily fallout or non-conforming material, but just variation that I would expect to see be considerably tighter. And it's not only on machine components. I can give you many other examples. Really, in a lot of cases, it's custom product, not off the shelf electronics. But from a process control and again, overall general category, to me, that's where I would like to see significant improvement. And I'm trying to drive that, but it is an uphill battle. It's that the key aspect that I've seen is prevention instead of building inspection into the processes and a lot of testing on the aerospace and defense side, whereas in the automotive side, it seems to be how do you prevent it from happening? So, it's more of a lean approach. So that's where I'd like to see it go.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Chris, Joe, any thoughts on future supplier developments?
Yeah, I think we are dealing with, some of the new stuff, whether it's a new material that we want to go into our boards or things like that. So that you're going to suffer through the development of all those, which is really natural when you're trying to come up with a new solution. To me, I'll go back to the excellence piece, where one of the things that has plagued me over my career from a quality aspect is documentation issues, labeling issues, marking issues. And you kind of scratch your head like, hey, here's a commodity that, is scoring low, at least the way we track and score our commodities, and it's basic blocking and tackling. So you can't get lost in the forest for the trees when you're not doing that. And honestly, it's not an industry specific thing. It's across industries where I've had that. And when I ask people, how come you're falling down on these basics? A lot of times it's like, well, this is where we're sticking our new people in. But you got to train them up. You still have to execute, because that's still, a mark on the scorecard from, delivering a quality aspect. It's something that's going to delay it, at least once it gets into our four walls to the, where it needs to be to, on the shop floor. But, also to Steve's part, I came out of automotive, and, we've basically mimicked our first article requirements on the automotive PPAP or AIAG type stuff. So it's a little bit harder from a process control aspect, just from a volume perspective, because when you do have volume, it really helps manufacturing. It gets you into that rhythm, that cadence. But when you're at lower volumes, you're not getting those capability studies. So what you're left with is, hey, what's the process? Everybody's got their process, so you're not quoting the parts. What's the PFEMA look like? Your process failure mode and effects analysis. That's where you're identifying risks. your control plan or your inspection plan. That's where you're controlling those identified risks. All those come together, and you can even make a case for like a special process application. So how are you doing your validations? Okay, that's going to be a demand not only in other industries, but if you're dealing with an AS9100 company, you have to have it. And that's probably a whole nother discussion that we could get into as well.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, don't forget the basic blocking and tackling, as part of that.
Excellent, excellent response. Thank you, Joe. Chris, anything to add about future supplier development?
Well, I would echo Joe's comments about documentation. In our industry, we have very stringent traceability requirements, and we've got to have markings, we've got to have the documentation complete. There's one thing about being able to make the technology, but it's another to do it as well as 100% of what the requirement is, which is deliver the part as it was expected, but package it and mark it and provide all the documentation for full traceability with the necessary FAIs or any other in-process checks documented that are required. And there's often this stuff just is not being missed, and it can be frustrating because you can have the best part sitting on the dock and nothing being accepted because of paperwork. So that's something is very annoying. But as we look into the future, though, certainly suppliers need to be understanding of what we're looking at for ITAR and CMMC. I think these are areas that maybe aren't as suppliers in New York or that may not be that familiar with it. But I see that you're offering training through TDO. I think that's very important because this has to be front and center where people are, organizations are adopting in their IT departments and deploying it through their organizations.
Great, great. Thank you. Well, we've had a number of references to some challenges that we all face in manufacturing. We've all come from different industries, and we are, at least across the panel, more aligned in the industry right now. But the diversity of your backgrounds is fantastic, I think, for our audience to learn from. So the next question is really for all three of you, and I'd like you to maybe just select one or two areas that you're currently facing challenges with to meet your current supply needs.
So I can start.
Great, thanks, Chris.
Well, in my earlier comments, I think what we are going to be seeing in the U.S., and it's already happening, right? With the tariffs that have been implemented here in the last few months have meant that there's been a resurgence of demand coming from all overseas and onshoring it to the U.S. And it seems to me that there's a lot of busy suppliers. And we, my organization, are looking for those suppliers who have the ability to onboard with us on a rapid basis and getting to delivery points of shorter lead times because even though we're onshoring, it means we still have to deliver, and our customers require to be serviced. And we need to have those suppliers in the U.S. and New York State ready to take on the business as it's coming back from overseas.
Great, great. Thank you, Chris. Joe, Steve, anything to add about challenges you're currently facing with meeting your supply needs?
I can jump in, Don. So
Thanks, Steve.
yeah, as you said, we all have a number of challenges. And so, One thing that has been a challenge, I'd say, and it's cyclical, and for whatever reason, right now we're back on the uphill swing. Quite a bit of pull-ins, and we've
Mhm.
talked about lead time. I think both Chris and Joe indicated that lead time is always a factor, right? I agree with that. And right now, we're asking suppliers to be responsive and pull in to meet our needs. In some cases, we've got suppliers, they're extending their lead times, which is counter to what we need. But probably my largest challenge, or at least among my largest challenges, um, obsolescence. So some of the assemblies and components that we've got have been in production for many, many years. So our legacy programs are aged for the most part, right? But they're still in production and there's still demand for the product. So in some cases, some of the electronic manufacturers, Texas Instruments for one, closing some of their facilities, consolidating. I understand the need to rationalize their operations. The challenge, of course, is they as they close down some of those operations, they're exiting and end of lifing some of their components. So we've got to work through either a last time buy, which is a significant expenditure to put that on the shelf, right? So we're trying to work through that, from a strategic standpoint, and we've got to build a business case. Does it make sense to put all this on the shelf? And so that adds complexity, and of course impacts cash flow, which is counter to what we're trying to do. So then, cases where we decide it doesn't make business sense to put that on the shelf, then we've got to work through a redesign effort, which in itself, has its own challenges. And so that to me right now is probably one of our bigger uphill battles, right? Our headwinds. So that's it from my side.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Joe, anything to add?
No, not really. I mean, tariffs, that's the topic of the day. Obsolescence has been and will continue to be the topic. It's something that we suffer through here. I think the only thing I would emphasize more is agility, and that's something that's demanding of us to our suppliers, because that's exactly what is demanded of us, of our customers. And, I really want to emphasize, and, I think it's the obvious, but, we're supporting our service men and service women and our allies with all kinds of capabilities, at least from an SRC standpoint. A lot of it is defensive capability, and we take that very seriously. And those demands get put on us, and that's why we're a demanding customer of our supply base as well. And if you're considering or getting into this or expanding your defense customer base, that's a fact of life.
Great, great. Thank you. And that's a nice transition into the last question that I have for our panelists. If someone wants to be considered as a supplier to your organization, what should they do?
I'll start off with that. The first thing I hear about when usually there's an ask for a new supplier from our engineering team, but we do have on our website where you can get the supplier contact information that'll be funneled through to us. But I'm always thinking through, what do I need? Why do I need, this new supplier? Because there's an expense to onboard a new supplier, maintain that new supplier. So the first thing I'm asking is, what's that capability that you're bringing? What what's the value proposition that's going to help me with my current supplier lineup? And then from that, maybe it's not just the technical capability, but as Chris mentioned before, on the mechanical side and the machining house side and the sheet metal side, there's, capacity concerns out there. Because the flip side of what I said is, okay, there's a cost to adding. Sometimes suppliers, deselect you as a customer. There are some folks out there that, say, hey, we maintain a very rigid split for where we want in our, we want to be 20% defense, 20% commercial, 20% automotive, 20%, med device. And once they get out of balance, they'll come back and they'll quote you. So there's always a need for it, at least in those cases. But what's your value prop that you're coming to us saying, here's the capability, here's the agility, the quick turn that we can do, and how we can help you out. And that's what I look for.
Great, great. Thank you, Joe. Chris, Steve, if someone wanted to be considered as a supplier to Amphenol Aerospace or TTM, what would they do?
So for Amphenol Aerospace, I think we've provided my email.
Yes, yeah, I'll be sharing that
I
slide in
welcome
just a
that
second.
and
Yep.
a phone call, so we have that conversation and we can explore what the opportunity is and if there's a good fit. We've got there is a website out there, Amphenol Aerospace. It does describe what we do, about our business and our products. And we do have a supplier portal, but it's password protected, user ID stuff, and that's for our vetted suppliers that are pulling down our dashboard into open order status and such. But for new interested parties, I would just start with an email or a phone call to me, and then we can take it from there.
Great, great. Thank you, Chris. And finally, Steve?
Yeah, likewise. You'll have my email address. I welcome, solicitations, and I also echo my colleagues here that really point to what proposition, what needs you might be able to fill. And of course, we do have some needs, and our supply chain supply base does evolve. So our needs also evolve. I would say another avenue that seems to be effective, trade shows, right? So not only showing your wares, but I do get a lot of leads through our business development teams. So they'll have a conversation with folks at trade shows, and I'll get people reaching out through my BD partners, and so that seems to be successful. I've had a number of conversations, and in some cases they may not go anywhere, but you don't know, right? And that's why you do reach out. So I'd recommend going through the trade show angle.
Great, great. Thank you. I'm going to share the slides back for just a few more minutes here. We will have these slides available to all people that have registered for the webinar after today, and there are links here on the supplier contact slide, slide number 5, for Amphenol Aerospace, Syracuse Research Corporation, and TTM Technologies. So certainly if you're interested in becoming a supplier to these organizations, I would encourage you to do that. Want to remind you that we'll have a few minutes for questions at the end of our time together today. If you have any questions for our panelists or about the program, please submit them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Chris, Steve, and Joe will be with us through that Q&A period, but I wanted to take this moment to thank them for sharing your time and valuable insight with our audience today. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right, I want to just spend a few minutes going through the program again, just a couple more details on this, and then we'll get into the Q&A section. So as mentioned earlier, the Maritime and Defense Supply Chain Capacity Program will provide funding to small and medium-sized New York State manufacturers. The applicants may receive up to 80% of the training costs subject to the following caps. So for ISO 9000, 2015 or AS 9100 implementations, that can be a gap assessment, internal auditor training. It can be remediation of the quality management system to prepare for an audit through registrar activities. That funding is available at 80% of those costs for training or consulting, up to $12,800. For cybersecurity, gap assessment, remediation, preparing folks for audit level activities, that is $6,500. Or 80% of the costs. For ITAR, same type of approach with an assessment, remediation activities, helping to stand up processes and procedures and tools to support ITAR compliance. 5,600 is the cap on that. Consulting services to help evaluate new suppliers or identify new component suppliers, that's up to 4,000. And then finally, consulting support to evaluate new manufacturing technologies, that's up to 4,000 as well. These services will be delivered through your local manufacturing extension partnership center. I have a link in a subsequent slide. If you're not sure who your local MEP partner is, we'll be happy to provide a link to find them. And we do request that companies that receive awards participate in post-award project tracking and assessments. These are some of the links. We have a website for this program. We have a link to apply for funding. So that's really the first step in the journey if you'd like to take advantage of one of these. And we always do recommend that you partner with your local MEP center. So we have a link to find your local MEP center if you're not familiar with who that is. There are 10 MEP centers in each region of New York State, each economic development region of New York State. And then we have the luxury of having one additional MEP Center, Fuse Hub, that is hosting our event today. They also help to coordinate activities in between MEP centers. So we would encourage you to look up your local MEP center, make contact with them. If you already have a contact, that's great. That'd be a great resource to learn more about the program. Okay, I'd like to turn this over to questions. We do have a few minutes for our panelists or myself to answer questions. We're going to bring in Mike Metzger at this point. I'll stop sharing my screen for a moment. Mike is a colleague of mine here at TDO, and Mike has graciously agreed to help field and present the questions back to us. So, Mike.
Thanks, Don. We've got, I think we've got just enough time to hopefully answer all the questions we've gotten. So the first one we have for the suppliers or for the folks called panelists, what advice would you give to a supplier that's new to government market and trying to scale up to compete as a vendor? Beyond raising capital and developing in-house production capabilities, how can a newer organization remain competitive while still building its foundation? And I'm happy to repeat that if need be.
No, my first reaction is you got to start small. I mean, you're obviously in a build mode. You have to, and this to me is where your business development folks, your sales folks got to get in, help solve those problems, prove performance, and then you grow the business that way. Not knowing the technology involved or what the business is, that's sort of the simplistic answer in my mind.
Yeah, actually took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say laser focused, right? Start small, identify what would be best fit in terms of a customer and, what meets your product portfolio. So I would recommend not reaching too far in terms of outside your core competency and start small. Yeah, ramp up. I'd say at a controlled rate. It's easy to say, and I understand the challenge. But I do agree, that the BD teams should be out there down on the streets looking for the right fit, and then select what makes most sense to you, and don't overreach.
Great. Thank you so much. A question that's come up quite a bit. If folks want to get a hold of you after the webinar, what would be the best way? We didn't want to give your email to 125 people, but some folks from the webinar would very much like to reach out. Any advice?
Yeah, so I'll take that one on behalf of the team. The slides that we'll be sharing afterwards, there are links to the best contact method. If you want to think of that as that's the door in to these organizations that Joe, Steve, and Chris have recommended. So that'll be on slide 5 of the slide deck that'll be shared shortly after our time today, along with a recording of today's event. So great question.
All right, thank you, Don. One of our audience members wanted to know if ISO 9001 is satisfactory as a COTS supplier, or is AS 9100 necessary?
No, for us, ISO 9001 is satisfactory for a COTS supplier. It's commercial off the shelf. And the same goes for that, because sometimes we'll take a COTS part and our engineering team may want to modify it slightly and it becomes more of an SRC drawing. Just a reminder, if you're not, you don't have a certified quality management system, it's not the end of the world. It's you can prove compliance, and usually that means our team's going in auditing your facility for compliance and your systems. But it puts more burden on us, because from a risk mitigation standpoint, how are you exerting control over your suppliers? There's more. You got to exert more control over those that aren't currently certified. So that means I might need to amp up my inspection. It's not an impossible hurdle, but it's actually more work on us to either do more inspection plus the auditing.
And for Amphenol Aerospace, AS 9100 is preferred for COTS items or otherwise. But we would understand the QMS system of the ISO certified supplier to better understand whether that's going to be a good match for us or not. So the answer is AS is preferred, but we will accept ISO, but only after we've reviewed the QMS.
Similar for TTM. AS 9100 is not required, but preferred. I'd assume if you're talking COTS, it's probably a distribution business model. So I'd say the requirements would probably be less stringent in terms of, ensuring, product meets the specification, right? Because it'd be passed through. And then we get back to the point of documentation and paperwork, which is essential for TTM as well, right? So we got to ensure compliance and CFCs and traceability. So that's probably where, from a distribution perspective, that's where the focus would be.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Don, I believe this next one is going to be for you. As far as eligibility is concerned, do we have to be an established supplier to a defense contractor, or are any small companies in New York State eligible?
It's a great question, Mike, and thanks for asking that, whoever submitted that question. The intention of the graph is actually, of the grant, is actually to increase the capability of the supply base. So, so both existing suppliers that may want to enhance their capacity or capabilities, or someone that is in an industry or has capabilities that will benefit this vertical of defense or maritime, but would like to get into it. So either would be really meeting the intention of the grant. What we're looking for here is to help small and medium-sized New York State manufacturers enter into this space or grow their capabilities in this space.
And Don, since you're talking, let me throw a couple more that I think are going to fall in your direction. Will the MDSCCP program fund capital equipment purchases?
And thank you, good question. Unfortunately, it will not. Like a lot of grant funding, they're not geared or earmarked for capital. They're earmarked towards creating capabilities in the form of developing your staff and your processes. So they're earmarked for training and consulting purposes. So great question.
All right. And how long will funding be available?
Another great question. We will have the program running until the funding runs out. We have allocated about half of the funding so far, so there's still room in the program if you would like to submit an application and work with your local MEP center to put together a plan to use the funding. We would love to hear from you. That link is also in the slide deck that you'll receive for both your local MEP center as well as the application. I'm expecting that this funding will last into next year. But it'll be based on an allocation basis. So first come, first serve is what we're looking for. And we've allocated about 50% of the funding so far since we opened up the doors to this program about 3 weeks ago.
And how long will it take to find out if you're approved?
It should be about a 1 week turnaround. And that's again in partnership with your local MEP center. So we will submit the application or return the application back to your local MEP center, ask for a proposal that you will work on with your local MEP center. Once we get that, we typically can turn that around in about a day or two. So the whole cycle should take 1, maybe 2 weeks max.
All right. And if somebody's interested in both ISO and CMMC, can they do both? Are they restricted to one?
Another great question. The way we're working the funding is one project at a time. So working with your local MEP center, you might want to pick what is first. That may also be a business development type of question to see which will position you to be more competitive in the industry. One at a time, if there's funding available when you complete the first, we can then allocate funding for the second project. We don't like to suggest what your business strategies are. So the sequence of those will really depend on what's the best benefit or what will create the most benefit for you competing in this industry. But we absolutely can fund any and all of these programs. We just are doing one at a time to try to ensure that we're able to give as many companies an opportunity to receive this funding and put it to good use.
All right. This one leads towards TTM a bit and Don a little bit, but one of our audience members represents a company on the other side of the supply chain. They are seeking U.S. suppliers for single layer, single sided, solid state surface mount copper PCBs. They're easy to get from China, but they'd really like a U.S. supply chain. They thought TTM might have that capability, so they'll reach out. But as they're seeking suppliers like these guys, they're hoping the MEP funding match helps companies like them. They fabricate components, subassemblies, and final assembly to box. So would they be eligible for funding?
On the funding side, and I'll let Steve talk about TTM's capabilities. On the funding side, we'd love to have a few more details that we can probably talk about offline. So I think if we can try to make sure we get that person's contact information, we will make a connection and have a more detailed conversation. Steve, I don't want to take away your answer though.
No, that's fine. So TTM is a broad capability in terms of bare boards. I can't speak to it very well, and I probably shouldn't anyway. So I do recommend that you reach out, and I'm sure someone would be happy to get back with you and explain what our capabilities are and see if that would meet your needs. But if you want to, I can help as far as the coordination. To make sure that you whoever the requester is can help with that coordination.
All right, thank you. And Don, how does somebody reach their local MEP center?
It's a great question. It's probably a great way to wrap up our time together today. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to hop back to that slide. There's a link for that here on slide 7 to reach your local MEP center. This takes you to a listing by geographic region of the MEP centers and a link to that specific center's contact information. And that is really a great place to end our time together today. So I want to again thank our panelists. Sincere thank you to Chris, Steve, and Joe for sharing their expertise. Oops, let me do that again. Sorry. There we go. Get rid of that. Sincere thank you to Joe, Chris, and Steve for sharing their expertise today.
Don, I don't think that's the slide you're meaning to show.
Okay. Let me.
We had the thank you slide, and I think you wanted the links.
Yep. All right. Let me go back and do that real quick. I just didn't hit the share button, I guess. Okay. So links are on slide 7 for your local MEP center. It'll be right here. And that'll take you to your local MEP center's contact information. You can look it up by geographic region. So again, thanks, just to wrap up our time together today. Thanks to Joe, Steve, and Chris for their expertise and for their support of this program. These 3 individuals have been involved in us standing up and rolling out this program really over the last couple of months. So a sincere thank you to you and your organizations for your support of this. I also wanted to thank FuseHub for sharing their talent to run today's webinar. Always a great team to work with, and flawless performance again today. So thank you to the FuseHub team for that. And finally to our attendees, thank you for attending today's webinar. Please contact your local MEP center for additional information. There's a lot of great things happening in New York State, especially in the manufacturing side, and we'd love to help you take advantage of what's available for you. We will be sharing today's slides and a link to the recording of today's webinar for future reference. So watch for that in your email. Everyone that has registered for the webinar will receive those links. That's all our time together today. So thank you again for attending, and to our panelists and to FuseHub, and good luck with your manufacturing journey.